The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists was founded soon after the end of World War II by Manhattan Project scientists to warn the public about the dangers posed to humanity by their invention of nuclear weapons. Well, I've been a reader of the Bulletin since I was a student, an undergraduate in physics at MIT, where I had classes from several faculty members who had been members of the Manhattan Project and who were working to try to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons. And some of them were involved in the Bulletin, and the Bulletin was one of the best sources of information about the nuclear danger. The initial focus of the Bulletin was the nuclear threat. That later expanded to include the threat from climate change. And then we realized that there were other areas of emerging technology that could, if not properly managed, pose a threat to the survival of humanity, that could pose the risk of catastrophe. One of those examples are biological threats from new technologies such as CRISPR. But now we see that there are other emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, and concerns have been raised that they may also pose new threats, as some of those are relatively straightforward and affect us today, such as disinformation that's generated by artificial intelligence, deepfakes, realistic videos. But there may, in the future, be threats that are only glimpsed today. And so we want to be constantly looking at the horizon and anticipating things that may be coming over the horizon, listening to voices at the forefront of these technologies about what may be possible in the future and what risks they may pose to humanity. We moved the clock forward closer to midnight this year because after reviewing all of these areas, nuclear risk, the risk posed by climate change, biological threats, disruptive technologies such as AI, the risks were growing, and the ability of governments, of leaders, to manage and reduce those risks is decreasing. Well, artificial intelligence, like large language models, have become increasingly powerful and now can create photos, videos that look just like the real thing and can be used to spread disinformation very effectively. We've seen this even from President Trump using such videos to try to persuade people that things have happened that have not happened, that there are perhaps riots in a location or acts of war that aren't fake. And it's a great concern that this could lead to the public believing things that are not true, supporting policies on a false basis. I think this is perhaps one of the biggest near-term challenges of artificial intelligence. Well, the Biden administration did release guidelines on the responsible use of artificial intelligence that I thought were very helpful. Unfortunately, those have been abandoned by the Trump administration. And what's unfortunate is there seems to be a belief that in this competition with China over the future of AI, that we can't afford to have any constraints, that it has to be full speed ahead without guardrails, and that is very concerning. So at least as regards AI, it would be good if people do what I try to do, that when I use AI for information, say in a search to give results, or perhaps I'm looking for ideas, I always go to the source. I make sure that information is correct. I go to whatever links are being used in the AI to ensure that the information is correct and authentic. And I think in that way we can hold AI to a high standard. Well, I teach a course on nuclear weapons and the history and the current status of nuclear forces. And it is easy to become pessimistic, to be a bit depressed about the state of the world when realizing that there are thousands of nuclear weapons currently deployed and ready for use. But I like to remind them that when I was a student in the 1980s, things looked perhaps even bleaker during the peak of the Cold War, during the Reagan administration. There was a constant worry, a real palpable feeling that the nuclear threat was increasing. But then the situation changed dramatically with Mikhail Gorbachev and his initiatives. In only a few years, the nuclear danger was reduced. And so I think we have to be ready for that opportunity in the future, that we have in the past reduced nuclear risks. We can do it again. We should be ready to take action when that opportunity arises. Well, I am encouraged by the times that President Trump has talked about the need for denuclearization and reducing the nuclear danger. And so what I really would look forward to is the start of real negotiations between the United States and Russia that lead to real reductions in nuclear forces and other measures that would reduce any incentive for the use of nuclear weapons. President Trump has called for the construction of a comprehensive national missile defense of the United States that includes interceptors that are based in space. This has been proposed before, including in the Reagan administration. Every time it's been proposed, it's been discovered that it would not be hugely expensive and not effective. But nevertheless, the deployment of these space-based interceptors could be a great concern. This is something that Russia and China have repeatedly called for a ban on weapons based in space that could attack objects on the ground. These interceptors also would be highly capable of attacking other objects in space, such as other satellites. And so I'm concerned that the testing of such an interceptor would trigger a new arms race in space, would trigger the weaponization of space. Because anything in orbit circles the Earth. It doesn't hover over a point on the Earth. It's continually in motion. And because the Earth rotates, you need thousands of interceptors in orbit to have just one within range of a missile that would be launched from Earth. About 1,600 interceptors in space to take just one intercept attempt against just one missile. If you wanted to take multiple intercept attempts against multiple missiles, you might need 10,000 of these. If each interceptor were as inexpensive as a ground-based interceptor that we deploy, like the THAAD or Aegis interceptors, each of those cost $10 to $30 million. And so you can quickly see, by multiplying the cost of an interceptor by 10,000 interceptors, you'd have a system that would cost hundreds of billions of dollars and could easily be defeated if an adversary, Russia or China, built missiles that simply burnt out faster at a lower altitude where our interceptors could not reach. The Outer Space Treaty declares that outer space and celestial bodies like the moon are for all humankind and only for peaceful purposes, that no military activities can be conducted on the moon, and that nuclear weapons cannot be stationed in space. Well, most countries, all spacefaring countries, are members of the Outer Space Treaty, including the United States and Russia and China. But last year, it was revealed that the U.S. had intelligence information indicating that Russia was preparing to place nuclear weapons in space, perhaps to attack U.S. satellites in the event of a war. They apparently were concerned about the ability of large satellite constellations like SpaceX's Starlink to provide communication during a war, and that the only way to destroy such a large satellite constellation would be with a nuclear explosion. And this is extremely concerning.